and it has huge implications, generation after generation, which we're now beginning to see in great numbers. For years and years, it went through phases, and I don't know if you want the history lesson, but post-war, the whole emphasis was on bottle feeding, the rise of the marketing industry, and the regimes of feeding a baby to schedules, and that scuppered breastfeeding. When they're pregnant, people like to tell them the horror stories. You know, oh, breastfeeding, oh, well, they say it's good, but they say it's best, but I had this, and this. And so it sounds complicated, it sounds as if you have to jump through hoops to do it. And what they see is bottle feeding, and the babies look okay. And people say things like, well, bottle feeding can't be that bad, else the government wouldn't allow it. Yeah, you laugh, I laugh, because we all know
that's not quite true.
Not quite true, exactly right. But I think that's it. It's what we see as the norm, and what we see in this country is, and the West generally, is bottle feeding. Even though the vast majority of women start breastfeeding in this country, half of them have given up by 6 weeks. And I think also there was with the rise of the milk industry, artificial milk industry, particularly in third world countries, it wasn't just about a food issue.
It was a moral issue.
It was a moral issue. People posing as health workers.
Pretending they were helping these people.
Pretending, that's
and
right.
these
if
babies
you
were
give
then
your
having
baby,
no immunity and
that's
dying.
right, yes. And if you give your baby this tin with a picture of a bonny white baby, as they were allowed to do in those days, people, if you're in poor circumstances, you look at that picture and think, hey, that's what I want for me. And so that's what they would do.
So can you explain a little more?
Well, I think there was a start then in research into breastfeeding in around about the 60s. There were people beginning to do a lot of research worldwide and actually publishing reports that were showing the health benefits of breastfeeding for varying periods of time, but actually stating the case, and people that became very well known in the field. So there was then a whole body of evidence that a lot of people knew anecdotally, but there was the evidence that if you breastfed for a certain number of times, there were going to be these health benefits, as opposed to just what was perceived as the ease of bottle feeding, and with no apparent ill effects. So that sort of toss a coin was actually beginning to be undermined by these research papers.
Well, you highlighted to me that all the symbols on doors and things, they're all pictures of bottle-fed babies, if this is a breastfeeding area, for example, as opposed to a mum with a baby.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And we've got, I think there's a budget of 50 million a year that's spent on marketing the bottle-fed.
Yes, it's a big
formula.
industry.
It's huge. If they can spend 50 million a year on just promoting bottle-fed, then it is, obviously, there's a lot of money involved.
Absolutely.
Some of the challenges that mums face in the early days, because obviously they've gone through a birth, so they're going to be a little tired and possibly even run down at that time. They've been feeding a baby for months internally. What are some of the challenges that these mums face?
Well, I think there's a whole mixture of challenges. I think one of them is that I think a lot of women today just doubt themselves. They doubt that they can get pregnant, even though we now say you can get pregnant whenever you like, whenever it fits in with your life. There's still that sort of sense of anxiety. And then they doubt that they can give birth without every drug under the sun. And then they doubt that they can actually feed this baby. And every mother with a new baby gets that sort of, oh, how am I going to cope? I'm responsible for this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. How am I going to do it? And so I think a lot of them start off really worried about the whole package. Then, sadly, a lot of them come up against health professionals that are very poorly trained. They don't deliberately want to scupper breastfeeding, they want to help these mothers because that's what midwives do. They want to look after the mother and the baby to the best of their ability. But it is to the best of their ability, and sometimes their ability is lacking in the field of breastfeeding. And as I say, it's not their fault, it's not that they deliberately want to do that, but they just don't have the tools of the trade because it has not been part of general undergraduate education for midwives and health visitors.
Which is surprising that it's not a focus when you think of how important it is physiologically to the baby.
And you've talked to me before about, these mums who feel like they've failed.
So midwives saw that breastfeeding was difficult and often failed because of the way we fed babies in those times, in the sort of 50s and 60s. So there was a whole generation of mothers who are now the grandmothers who were, to a large extent, as they would describe it, failed breastfeeders. They tried and they failed. So midwives saw that. And of course midwives by and large are mothers. Well, they may be fathers as well, but by and large a lot of them are mothers and possibly have not had very positive experiences themselves. So it comes with a whole lot of baggage.
Right.
And that went on for a generation until the UNICEF Baby Friendly Initiative really dug in and said, we're all over the world, we've got a increasing number of babies that aren't breastfed with all the health disadvantages that go with that. And we've got to do something about it. So they stepped in and created a system whereby healthcare facilities, mainly hospitals in those days, were accredited with standards that supported and promoted breastfeeding. And actually number 2 on the list was training all health professionals. And they had to actually put that in because it hadn't happened.
Right.
When I first started in this game, I had no training whatsoever. I was told, go and help that mother with breastfeeding. And I was 20 and I thought, oh, I don't know what to do. And I developed what I call the screw jar syndrome. You had the baby and you had the mother and magically you screwed them together. And I didn't think that was wrong. It failed most of the time. There's probably women out there with little plastic effigies of me with pins in. But I didn't know that you could do, that there were any skills because nobody told me. They just said, go ahead and do it.
So I know you are involved with the Baby Friendly Initiative. Why do you think that they had to go to that degree to actually create a whole initiative worldwide around this? You mentioned about the actual health side of it and the actual diseases, did you say?
Today this could be the greatest day of our lives. Before it all ends, before